Hello there, YouTube. Devin here again, today with another uniform review for you, and this is actually probably on one of my favorite families of uniforms. Not my single favorite uniform, but it's actually probably my favorite family of uniforms that has ever existed, and that would be on the Russian Gorka family of uniforms. Now, Gorka literally translates to basically mountain uniform. It has a very history going all the way back to World War II, where there's really two origin stories, and there isn't really a set hard origin story for this uniform. But the two most widely accepted things are leading back to Germans, basically the Germans, mostly the Battle of the Caucasus, where Army Group South was trying to reach Baku, and the Baku oil fields way down past over the Caucasus Mountains in, the modern day region of that. So, but it's overshadowed by Stalingrad, which was kind of a diversionary, kind of slash not supposed to happen fight. That's probably the most known battle in the southern campaign with Army Group South, in the excursion into Eastern Europe and Russia and stuff like that. The other one really being the Siege of Sevastopol, but that's all that really anyone knows about the whole Army Group South in World War II. The main objective was to capture the oil fields of southern Russia and the Caucasus, which that oil would have been a lifesaver for the German war machine, and probably would have changed a pretty aggressive tide of the war. Honestly, if Germany had all the fuel they could really ever use, they probably could have accomplished a whole lot more. All that other good stuff. But it all goes back to that battle, basically the Battle of the Caucasus, where either the Soviets captured German uniforms for fighting in the mountains because they were better than the ones they were wearing, much more water repellent, much more windproof, stuff like that, and they really liked them, or if at some point a uniform was made based off of the German uniform, rather than just simply capturing them and using them to a degree. But that's the origin story. One of those two things. Either the Soviets made one, or they captured German stuff and, used it and built uniforms off of that, which is either or. They're both very similar origin stories, but something going back to German World War II, Gebirgsjäger, uniforms being used as the template for the Gorka. Then the Gorka really comes into its own in Afghanistan. When the Russians invade Afghanistan, they come out with a uniform that is suitable for fighting in a mountain environment at the request of the government. They needed something that was wind resistant, water resistant, relatively easy to make, breathable, good in a multiple different and variations of environments, because, the bottom of a mountain can be a much different environment than the top of a mountain, and some mountains can, in the same range, can have entirely different environments on them. And Afghanistan is a very well-known, shown in the media, especially with all the conflicts that have been happening there, and however many countries have been sent there as coalition forces and stuff like that, not to mention the British Empire was thrown out of there, the Soviet Union was thrown out of there, Alexander the Great was thrown out of there. People have been fighting there for centuries, and basically millennia, and it varies a lot. The country does, from north to south and east to west, even though it's all the Hindu Kush mountain range. So the Soviet government and, the military complex, the military-industrial complex, comes up with the Gorka 1, which is a relatively heavy uniform consisting of a pair of trousers with a bib set of overalls, the big pocket in the front for storing documents and stuff like that, and gloves and other things, and then kind of an overcoat made out of a very heavy 100% cotton shelter cloth, or tent cloth, oftentimes it's referred to. And it was just a button up front, and it was, just a pair of trousers with suspenders that'd go over a bib overall, basically made out of tent cloth, shelter cloth, which is something that has been used for a long time, going all the way back to World War I. Shelter cloth cotton is just the same thing, and it would be treated with a sort of kind of water repellent thing, and it would basically, in a really heavy rain, water would run off rather than being absorbed into the uniform. But in like mist and stuff like that, the uniforms would get soggy. But it was a very, very cheap uniform to make. It was a very, very comfortable uniform. It was actually really well liked and incredibly durable. That shelter, that tent fabric and stuff was very, very, very strong and upheld, especially in the mountains with the jagged rocks and climbing and all the equipment you had to have and stuff. It performed rather well. So much so that there is now 8 generations of Gorka. There's actually really broken down into 2 groups. There's the Gorkas that open in the front with the button seam. Then there is the anorak style. And then basically all the Gorkas like 1 through 8 are either just different manufacturers, or they're for different seasons, or they're in different camo patterns, or some not in camo patterns, some in different camo patterns, some in new fabric, some in the old tent fabric. But basically there's 2 classifications. There's the anorak style, the original, you know, and then there's the button-up front style, and it's really a preference, whichever one you want, because there's summer versions of both, but they'll have different designations. There's demi-season versions of both in, you know, different weights and different materials and different patterns and stuff, and there's different manufacturers, and some are in ripstop and some are not, and some are in just like canvas material, and some have different reinforcements, you know, whereas these just have polyester reinforcements and stuff like that. You know, it's just how it is. It's a very confusing thing, but they're all look upable, all the different levels of Gorka and what they're used for, and they can come in, since Russia's used like every pattern imaginable, even UCP, you can get a Gorka in literally any camouflage pattern, basically. German Flecktarn, Swedish camo, you know, Finnish camo, French, Central European pattern, Italian camo, you know, American different versions of camo, Chinese patterns of camo, all of them in different generations, because the Russians just threw uniforms at any camouflage pattern, because they're such a massive country and they have so many different environments that they kind of need that. And the Gorka is designed as basically an oversuit. It's meant to be used in a very, very harsh environment. It has a lot of really, really neat, cool features we're going to cover here in this video when we compare it to the American BDUs, because they were actually in use at the same time, once again. So a lot of the early versions of the Gorka anyways, most of the versions of the Gorka coming out basically before 2005, which is kind of when the BDUs were phased out, and then after that you basically just see camouflage patterns added and some kind of new space age materials here and there for reinforcements and stuff, but for the most part it's the same uniform. So hopefully that covers some history on the Gorka. History's kind of hard to track down on the Gorka. Everything's kind of hit or miss or kind of random, and there's so many different versions and manufacturers and even different countries that use the Gorka now, and it's actually such a versatile, awesome uniform, and I actually really, really love it. This is one that I have actually modified myself, and it's in one of my favorite Russian patterns, the Twilight pattern, which has this kind of birch bark-esque pixelation pattern in it, which is really, really, really cool. So stay tuned. We're going to flip the camera around. We're going to compare the blouse of the Gorka to the blouse of the M81 BDU uniform here, and we'll go over all the features and everything of each, and then we will compare the trousers. So stay tuned. Alrighty, so here we are with the Gorka on the left in a summer weight variation of Gorka. Here we have the summer weight version of the American M81 BDUs, and as normal we're going to start with bottom, work our way up here. We're going to start at the cuffs. So the Gorka has a very, very nice elasticized cuff, which is actually really, you don't really see a lot of people rolling their sleeves up, but this makes it very easy to do because of these 2 elasticized portions here. Your elbow sits in there very, very snug actually, and it works quite well for keeping it from sliding up or down your arm any further. The Americans, you can obviously roll the BDU sleeves all the way up to mid-bicep. Cuffs are adjustable via buttons in this little tab, okay? Both of these uniforms do have reinforced elbows. The Russian stuff is a different fabric though. So on the forearms and all the way up to the elbows, there's this very nice polyester kind of denier fabric. It's a very, very abrasion resistant fabric without being that scratchy windbreakery type material, whereas the M81s of course just have this extra layer of fabric stitched on there to provide just 2 layers of cloth essentially. Moving up from that, you can see that there is a big single button closure pocket here on the Gorka uniform. It's made out of that same shelter material, stuff like that. It's a big heavy duty material, which is good at keeping whatever you want in this pocket dry. It's a very water repellent fabric. The main portion of the fabric, these are actually very, very similar. This blouse is made out of 100% cotton, but the vast majority of the M81 BDUs would be made out of 50% nylon, 50% cotton, and these are made out of a 60-40 poly cotton ripstop. So they're both ripstop, and they're both in a very similar weight and feel of fabric, which is nice for comparing these. Okay, so moving up from there, you see this big yoke on the Russian uniform, and it goes all the way around to the back even of this very water repellent, wind retardant, cloth. Which is very, very nice feature, because your shoulders are usually the first thing to get wet. Usually your helmet is keeping your head dry and stuff like that. But your shoulders are a thing that gets very, very wet usually first, because it is a horizontal surface, where the rest of you is mostly vertical surface underneath your shoulders. So it's a very good way to actually help keep the soldier dry and less miserable. You do not have that on the M81s. So, all right, moving down, you see there's no chest pockets here on the Gorka uniform. A lot of that is because they want wearing body armor. You're not going to be able to access those pockets anyways. The Russians are smart. They don't really make a lot of garbage, to be fair. So they decided no chest pockets. You don't need them. But they do have these waist pockets, much like the M81 does, except they went for a single button closure, and the pockets are internal. They are also made out of the shelter fabric and stuff like that, and they go down in between layers of cloth in the jacket. So rather than like needing to make a whole new pocket, the pocket's this wide on the inside, but the mouth is open this far because it's just sandwiched between, layers of fabric. Then there's one little, inside pocket here that also has your spare button, should you need it, but that's just closed normally for whatever you need it to be. It's a little extra spare bit of fabric, and the Russians are kind of known for that. This pocket's basically useless, but it's usually cannibalized for extra fabric to repair stuff, and then you have your spare button. So you see the nice elasticized reinforcements here, keeping the pocket in place and stuff like that, holding it, connecting it to the edge of the jacket. But basically the whole inside bottom portion of this jacket is pocket on both sides. The M81s, you do not have that. You have just a square pocket with 2-button closure, which is a little bit unfortunate because they're not as big a capacity. The mouth openings are bigger on the Russian uniform, and they are roll top, which means they're much more secure. And even though they only have a 1-button closure, and it actually keeps a lot more water and debris out than the American BDU pockets are, because even when buttoned, there's little access points here on the side for water and stuff to get in, and they aren't roll top. They're just open top with a flap over it, so that's not super well thought out. The right and left arms are the same on both uniforms. So moving up from there now, they are both button closures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 basically buttons on the Russian uniform for the most part. The bottom one's hardly ever done because it's just for wind resistance normally. You hardly ever see that done up unless it's really, really cold out. But then you have a hood with 3 closures. So the hood with 3 closures is pretty common on the Gorka uniform. You can see the big shelter cloth hood. Once again, it has an adjustable cotton string here to adjust the tightness of it. It is designed to both fit over helmets and everything like that. It is adjustable here in the rear via plastic, via a Velcro adjustment tab if you wanted to roll it up or something like that, or keep it from coming too far forward. It is also adjustable way back here in the back via a drawstring, as well as up here around the top. So it's a very, very versatile hood. It works very, very well. The shelter fabric keeps it quiet while still being very, very waterproof. So the inside of this uniform doesn't have a whole lot going on for it because it is basically just an over uniform. It does have an elasticized midsection here right at about the waist, kind of like the belly button area, to help keep wind and maintain body heat throughout the uniform. So there is a drawstring adjustable around the bottom via 2 little tabs right here, as you can see, that are used to actually add even more wind resistance to this entire uniform, which is really, really, really neat. So here is the tag of the manufacturer. So Tactic 9 made this one. And then here's your size tank. This is a 52-5, and it is also a spare strip of fabric, just how that is. So spare strip of fabric with your size on it, and then there's your manufacturer tag, and then you have a little kind of polyester hanging loop on the uniform. So Nothing super fancy, no thrills. We're going to rotate the uniforms around here real quick, take a look at the backs of each of these, and compare them. So the M81 BDU, obviously, just a plain back, but it lets you see the pattern kind of in its entirety. That's a good way to compare these. Now, there is actually Gorkas in this pattern. You can get Gorkas in the M81 Woodland, essentially, or a Russian copy of it. The Russians actually really, really like the M81 Woodland pattern, and it's actually used by the mountain troops a lot. Especially in the interior, because it works quite well in the wooded areas and the like pine forests of Russia. So the interior forests of Russia, that the M81 Woodland works surprisingly well. But as you can see here, here's that big shelter cloth cape that I told you, the yoke that's part of the shoulders. You can see this elasticized strap here in the back that helps kind of gather the fabric to maintain that body heat. And you get to see this awesome, very kind of innovative Russian twilight pattern that's kind of sort of based off of Pencott in a way, by having the micropixels in the pixels of the pattern itself, which is very cool, I think. And the Russians were kind of the first ones to fully mass issue and adopt a pattern like this, which is really neat. So very cool pattern. So now we're going to take a look at the trousers compared to the M81 trousers, and then we will conclude the video. Alrighty, so here we have the M81 field trousers and the Russian Gorka trousers, and we're going to start, bottom to top. Normal, these are kind of the front side of the pants, and then we'll flip it over and kind of look at the inside of the pants, and we'll cover some features that are on the side, such as the pockets and everything like that as we go here. So starting off, cuff adjustment here on the Gorka trousers. You have an elasticized outer cuff, and then you have this kind of mesh inner cuff that is adjustable via a drawstring that you would tie around, and then you would tuck this portion into your boot, and this mesh aids in ventilation, but it also keeps debris and stuff out of your boot. And then this provides basically an over-the-top cover for helping maintain your temperature in cold environments, but it can be rolled up, and just the mesh exposed if you want better ventilation in a hot environment. But it is this nice elasticized cuff that, for one, protects the upper portion of your boot from extra added debris and stuff like that. And it also helps keep water out of your boot, because it is, once again, made out of that shelter cloth type material. Whereas the M81 Woodland pants have just a little nylon drawstring around the cuff of the pants, usually bloused over your boots, which provides egress points for both dirt and water relatively easily, but American boots are usually pretty tight fitting and pretty thin, not a lot of insulation or anything in them, so not a lot of stuff really sneaks into your boots anyways. And it kind of looks smarter, in my opinion, the American way of doing stuff with the blousing your boots. It looks good, but it's probably not as effective as this Russian thing. Moving up from there, you have the articulated knees on the Russian Gorka uniform. Much like the American improved hot weather combat uniform, it has these kind of polyester reinforced articulated knees that give you extra space for kneeling and crouching and climbing and stuff like that, like you would be doing in a lot of military scenarios and environments, without causing your uniform to, ride up, your pants leg to pull up on you as you kneel or something like that. It gives you extra fabric. This big, massive, horrendous looking extra fabric here in the front is literally that, extra fabric to allow your leg to bend naturally without your uniform straining to match your body. Whereas the M81 pants do not have that. They just have a double reinforced knee. As you see, they lay very flat. They don't have that extra fabric for that articulation, which is unfortunate, but it is kind of an older generation of pants, to be honest, compared to this generation of Gorka. So from there, we have the pants. The cargo pockets are very reminiscent of the American ACUs, actually. They're kind of these weird slash pockets with these, triple bellows. There's an accordion bellow here on the side, and then two bellows in the center, and it's this kind of weird angle that's supposed to be easier to reach into while you're sitting down in a vehicle or in a helicopter or something, having this weird angle to the opening mouth of the pocket. Double button closure. The M81 BDUs are, a squared off pocket of a very similar fashion, actually. So just the same exact pocket, basically, but without the aggressive angle to the flap on the top, for allowing you to make it easier to grab stuff out of your pocket while you're sitting down or with body armor or something. Okay, so moving on from that, two slash pockets, one on either side, very deep slash pockets, made out of the same material that the uniform is made out of, the polyester cotton ripstop. The BDUs are the same, about the same size slash pockets. Moving up from there, you have the waist, which is, again, adjustable via elastic and drawstring, and then it has these very, very wide, big belt loops, which I super like. I really, really like these very, very wide, heavy-duty belt loops, because, for one, they distribute the weight a lot nicer of the pants. They keep these sections from between the belt from pulling down, especially if your pockets are full of really, really heavy stuff, which keeps the pants from cutting into you. But that's a big problem I have with a lot of U.S. pants, is they have these very, very narrow, thin belt loops that often tear, for one, very easily tear, and they don't distribute the weight very well. So you get these sections in between the belt loops that sag when your pockets are really full, and it causes this to pull out from under your belt, and then your pants bunch up, and it's a bunch of problems like that, especially as the fabric gets old and stretches and you're using it and wearing it and stuff. The Gorka uniform kind of prevents that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open both of these uniforms and turn them the other way around so you can see what the inside portion of the uniform would look like, kind of at the back ankle now. So once again, starting at the ankle moving forward, the BDUs really don't have anything going on, basically up till we get to like the reinforced seat, but the Gorka pants do. So just right at about the top part of the calf, there's an elasticized portion of the pants, once again to help keep the uniform in place, but as well as trap body heat and regulate temperature and moisture and stuff like that. Then you have one kind of just below where your butt cheek would be, another elasticized portion on both legs, which is really, really well thought out. Then you have a big reinforced seat that is actually the whole top portion of the pants, basically, in the back, made out of the shelter cloth. Once again, that's going to, for one, keep your butt from getting wet. It's going to provide a lot of abrasion resistance. It's a really, really good uniform thing. And then the pockets. Now, these pockets I kind of have a problem with on this particular Gorka uniform. They're this really odd shape. So they're not like gusseted or anything. They're not inside the pants. They're on the outside. Okay, they're very, very flat. Okay, and they're this weird like trapezoid shape. They have a single button closure and no flap. So they fill with water because they're all this shelter fabric and there's no drain holes or drain ports or anything in them. And like they just fill with dirt and debris and stuff like that because there's no flap on these, which I thought was a very, very poor idea. But I guess a lot of guys from everything I've read don't really use those pockets, and a lot of them get cut off. A lot of guys go through the work to cut those rear pockets off and just save the buttons and stuff to use as patches for the uniform because they are so ineffective in the way they do that. And there are Gorka uniforms subsequently that do have pocket flaps and stuff now that are much better. But on this particular design, it has kind of the standard pockets, which a lot of people really, really don't like. And I can see why. There's a reinforced seat on the M81 BDUs here, as you can see, which is once again just a double layer of the regular uniform fabric. But unlike the Russian uniform, even though these are much healthier trousers, they do have pocket flaps with double button closures, whereas the Russian ones only had single button closures. And then much like the Russian pants, they do have an adjustment for if you do not have a belt or anything like that, or your pants do not fit perfectly. You do have these little cotton straps and these M buckles to adjust the circumference of the waist. But the Russians tended to use a drawstring type with these little loops that you can tie throughout various parts of the uniform, and the elastic, which is a much nicer, more modern solution, much more comfortable solution, because it's not going to dig into you as much as these little M buckles do on the BDUs. So hopefully you learned something about this, because this is a fantastic uniform. All the variations of the Gorka are really fantastic uniforms. I probably have 4 or 5 of them for different seasons and different patterns and stuff. It's a very, very, very versatile, very awesome uniform. For a uniform to basically survive unchanged since the 1970s is pretty hard. And the Gorka is one of those, where they basically just upgraded materials and patterns. They really haven't changed the fundamentals of the uniform in 50 years, which is a very, very awesome pattern of uniform. And if you do have one, you probably know what I'm talking about how awesome they are and how awesome they fit and how they don't restrict your movement at all, but they breathe super well. They're really, really comfortable, and they're super versatile, and they can really go anywhere and do anything as long as you pick the right Gorka for what environment you're going to be in. A lot of American uniforms are kind of designed to do one specific task, or they try to do too many tasks at once and they end up doing none of them well. The Gorka is a very uniform that was designed for one specific task, but it works really, really well in a lot of environments just by proxy. So because of that one specific task it was designed to do happens to involve a lot of environments. So hopefully you learned something, all that other good stuff about this uniform. If you do have a Gorka, I'd very much like to know which one you have in the comments and what you think about it and stuff like that. If you are one of my old Soviet subscribers, there are a few of you out there, if you got issued an original Gorka 1, I would very much love to hear about your experiences with the originals. They are super fantastic from what I hear. I don't have one. An original one is like $700 right now. It's a dream thing to have in my size at one point. But I'd very much like to hear about if you have any experience with a Gorka 1 as an original like Soviet soldier or Russian soldier. That'd be super, super cool to hear about. But otherwise, I'd love to hear about all your guys' Gorkas or what you think about this uniform compared to what the Americans were fielding at the same time. So thank you all for stopping by. Hopefully you like and subscribe. Really, really helps me out in the algorithms. Please share the channel. We're getting darn near 4,000 subscribers so far this year. And if you do want to make a contribution to the Patreon, I will leave a link to that in the description. As little as $1 a month gets all the questions you want to ask me answered because you get to be a part of the Discord. And it really, really goes a long way to support the channel as far as editing software and new camera equipment and stuff like that goes. So thank you all for that. Special thank you to my Patreon members and all the other good stuff. Hopefully you all enjoy this uniform as much as I do. And if you don't have one, I highly encourage you get one. Thank you all for watching and stay tuned for the next video.